Hey there, friend. Welcome to the Holler. Your dear host is still down here with me. Be careful. If you keep listening, you might find yourself in Studio B as well.
The Man and Lookout 43. The Midnight Holler, Broadcast 11. I knew those stairs on my tower like the back of my hand. It got to the point where I could go up 2 at a time, blindfolded if I needed to. The stairs were steel, and I know that there are 42 of them, 4 flights, bolted to a frame that had been standing on that butte since 1963. They rang a little. Didn't matter how careful you were. A marmot crossing the bottom landing would put a sound through the whole structure, like somebody tapping a pipe a few feet away, which is how I knew somebody was on them before I ever looked. It was a little after 11 at night, moon already down, and I had the lantern off because I'd been watching a storm cell work its way along the ridges to the southeast. You can't see lightning with a dam with a light burning behind you. So I was sitting in the dark, with my elbows on the map table, counting strikes and then marking them. And the first flight of stairs went off underneath me. I remember thinking of bear. Everybody thinks bear. But it's true. Bears will come up to the lower landing sometimes if you've been careless with grease. Then the second flight went, and it went in a rhythm. And bears just don't produce a rhythm like that. I got up and went out to the catwalk and leaned over the rail. The forest below the tower was just black. No headlamp, no flashlight, nothing. But I could see something on the second landing, a shape darker than the dark around it, and one hand sliding along the outside rail, the way a man does when he's climbing stairs he's climbed 1,000 times and doesn't need to look at his feet. I said, "Hey." Then I said it again, louder, and I put my own name on it, and my tower's name, the way you announce yourself, officially. But he didn't answer, and he didn't stop either. Same pace. Not hurrying, but not slow either. The pace of a man walking to his own truck. And standing up there with both hands on that rail, I understood who it was, immediately. And I understood it in my stomach before my head caught up. I had never seen him. I'd never shaken his hand. But I talked to him every single evening, for 3 weeks, and I knew that man's voice better than I knew my ex-wife's by then. It was Ian. Three weeks earlier. I got hired on the second week of June, which is late for a lookout. And the reason it was late is that the guy they had hired first got a job with the state and quit before he ever walked up the hill. That happens more than people think. Lookout jobs sound romantic in February, and then look like a bad idea in June. Why did I take it? I took it because I couldn't do engines anymore. I might as well get this part out of the way, because I guess it doesn't matter, and I'd rather just say it as it is and have it leak out sideways later. 4 seasons before any of this, I was on an engine crew out of the Githow, and we got burned over a fire called the Poison Grade. It was a nothing fire. It was 11 acres in the morning, and then it was a Type 1 incident by dinner. A wind came around a shoulder of rock that the models said it wouldn't come around, and the fire found a slope of cured grass and old blowdown. And we had about 110 seconds that I remember, and then a lot of hours that I just don't. Marco Reyes died. So did a kid everybody called Bird, whose real name was Aaron Bird, which he hated because it made the nickname obvious, and he wanted people to think it was because he ate so much. Kid was only 22 years old. I got out because of where I happened to be standing. That's it. That's the whole reason. After that, I did 2 seasons of fuels work, which is just chainsaws and brush piles and no fire at all, and I was fine at it. And then in the winter, my marriage went the way it was always going to go. Rachel didn't leave because of the fire. She left because for 2 years, I'd been living in the house like a boarder, and she got tired of being the only person in her own marriage. I don't blame her. She was right. I've had a lot of time to think about whether she was right, and honestly, I think she was. So in June, I was 31, divorced, living in a rented room in Twist with a duffel bag and a guitar I don't even play very well, with basically no credit score, and then a fire tech named Denny Halverson asked me over the phone if I could sit still. I said, I don't know, maybe. He said, "That's the right answer. The guys who say yes never last." Quartz Butte is not one of the famous ones. It's not desolation, it's not sourdough, nobody's written a book on it. It's a bald knob at just under 6,300 feet on the east side of the crest, with a big burn scar from '01 laid out below it to the south, and a lot of very old timber to the north where the fire didn't get. You drive Forest Road 4720, you park at a wide spot with a cattle guard, and then you hike about 1.5 miles up a trail that's mostly rock stairs that somebody built with a rock bar in the 30s. Then there's the tower. The cab is 14 by 14, an L4 pattern, if you know what that is, which just means windows on all 4 walls, and a catwalk running around the outside of it. Hip roof, shutters you swing down and prop with poles. Inside, the whole center of the floor is taken up by the Osborne Firefinder, which is a big brass and steel ring about 2.5 feet across mounted on a pedestal, with a circular map of the district inside the ring and then 2 sighting vanes that rotate over it. Front vane's got a horsehair wire in it. You put the hair on the smoke, you read the azimuth off the ring, you read the vertical angle off the little scale, and you've got a bearing. Some of those firefinders have been in service since the 20s. Mine had a small crack in the glass and a dead spider under it that I never did manage to get out. Everything else was arranged around that ring like the room was built for the instrument, which it pretty much was. Bed on the north wall, iron frame, and the mattress was the kind you flip and it doesn't really help anything. 2-burner Coleman, propane fridge that ran warm, a little wood stove with a flue going out of the wall and a screen on the top of the pipe. Cupboards with about 9 years of other people's dry goods in them, including a bag of lentils I finally threw out and a bottle of hot sauce with a name I'd never seen before or since. Water came from a cistern under the tower that got filled by the roof and by the district hauling it in when the roof didn't cooperate. And if you were smart, you ran it through a filter, and if you were lazy, you didn't. And yes, I was lazy. Although just one time that I remember. Outhouse was 90 feet down the ridge on the west side, which is a long way in a lightning storm and a longer way in your socks. Denny walked me through the first day. He'd been doing this for about 30 years, and he talked like a man reading off a checklist he'd stopped needing in 1998. Morning check-in with dispatch at 8. Weather observation at 1 in the afternoon, every single day, no exceptions. And you call it in, whether anybody sounds like they care or not. Smoke reports the second you see something, and not 1 minute after you've made up your mind about it. Because a lookout who waits until he's sure is a lookout who's useless. He showed me the psychrometer, which is 2 thermometers on a little sling that you whirl around your head like a kid with a noisemaker. I'm not even kidding about that one. Dry bulb, wet bulb. You get the difference, and you look it up in a table and it gives you relative humidity. You'd think there'd be a digital gizmo for that now, and I guess there is. And there was one on the shelf, but Denny told me to use the sling anyway because the gizmo lies when it gets hot, and because knowing how to do it the old way is the difference between being a lookout and being a guy with a thermometer. Fuel sticks out on the rack, 10 hour, and you weigh them and log the number. He showed me the stool, too. It's a wooden stool with glass insulators for feet, like the ones off an old telephone pole. When lightning's on top of you, you unplug what you can, you don't touch the metal, and you sit on the stool with your hands in your lap and you wait it out. I laughed a little when he looked at me with no expression at all and said the tower gets hit about every 3rd season. Then I stopped laughing. Then he said, "Radio," and pointed at the shelf. "Talk to dispatch on the district repeater. There's a couple other towers you might hear. Be neighborly. It's a long summer." He left at about 3 in the afternoon. I stood on the catwalk and watched him go down the rock stairs, and it took him a surprisingly long time to disappear. And then it was quiet in a way that I hadn't been ready for. Now, I don't know if it's because Fire watching is in my blood, or I'm just used to documenting every single thing I see and experience, but I want to tell you what those first 4 days were actually like. I ain't going to skip over them. Here it is. You ready for it? They were absolutely boring. And then they were kind of peaceful. And then around the third day, they got pretty bad. And then I guess they got better. That's pretty much the gist of it. You wake up at 5:30 whether you want to or not, because the sun comes into a glass box from every direction, and there's no hiding from it. You make coffee, you do a scan. Scanning is not staring, by the way. Denny told me that, and he's actually right. You go around the horizon in a pattern, slow, and then you look at the places smoke likes to be, which is drainages and old landings and any place a road ends. Then you go around again the other way, just because your eyes get lazy in one direction. And then you check in at 8. Okanagan, Quartz Butte, in service. They say copy. That's it. That's the whole shebang. And after a week, that little exchange is a bigger part of your day than it has any right to be, if I'm honest. Oh yeah, you sweep. Good God, do you sweep. Those flying ants come up in swarms on hot afternoons, and they get in everything. And oh yeah, there are deer mice under the floor that you have to stay on top of, because hantavirus is not a rumor. You wash in a basin, you wipe the windows down twice a day because the glass is what you work through, and a smear on the glass at 10 in the morning becomes a fire at 10:15. At 1 o'clock, you sling the psychrometer and take your wind and call it in. Dry bulb 84, wet bulb 58, RH 22, winds west-southwest at 6 gusting 11, fuel stick at 9%. Dispatch reads it back. It goes into a system somewhere and turns into a number on somebody's fire danger sign at the bottom of a highway. Then you have 11 hours of daylight, and absolutely nothing. The third day is the one that got to me, I guess. I had read everything I brought, which was 3 books, which I thought was a lot. Hell, I thought it would take 3 weeks at least to get through the Dune books I brought. I cleaned the firefinder glass and rearranged the cupboard. Around 4 in the afternoon, I sat down on the bed and looked at the floor. The whole thing came up on me at once. You start thinking random, silly thoughts like, oh yeah, Marco's kid is going to be 7 this year. How about that? That's the sort of thought that there's just no room to walk away from when you're sitting in a 14 by 14 box. I went out on the catwalk and I stood there for probably an hour. Whiskey Jacks came around. Grey Jays, if you want the real name. They're bold as anything. Hell, they'll take bread out of your fingers, and they've got no fear at all because 100 years of lookouts have fed them off that railing. That was the day I started talking out loud. To the birds at first, like a damn Disney princess, and then not really to the birds. The sun went behind the crest, and the radio came on.
Quartz Butte, lookout 43.
I sat there for a second because I'd only heard dispatch and Denny on that radio, and this was a different kind of voice. Older, but easy. A little gravel in it, and something amused underneath, like he was already halfway into a joke he hadn't told you yet. That picked up. Quartz Butte, go ahead.
You'd be the new fella.
Yeah, I guess that's me.
Thought so. Whole district's been dry on the radio for a week. What's your name?
Ethan Mercer.
Ian,
He said.
43. Northwest of you a good ways, up over the divide. You won't see me. Nobody sees me.
A little pause.
How you liking the box?
It's smaller than it looks in the photos, that's for sure. He laughed at that. One short, honest laugh, and I remember smiling at the radio.
They all are.
He said.
You get so you know exactly how many steps it is from the stove to the bed. 4 in mine. You'll count yours whether you mean to or not.
We talked for maybe 10 minutes. He asked what I'd done before, and I said engines, and he said,
Ah.
And then didn't ask anything else about it, which I noticed. Most people ask, but he asked what my weather had been instead, and I told him, and he said my humidity numbers were going to fall off a cliff in about 6 days, and asked if I found the cold spot yet. The what?
There's a cold spot on your butte. Every one of them has one. Little bench of rock on the north side under the tree line where the air pools. 20 degrees cooler than your catwalk at 4 in the afternoon. When it gets hot enough that you're lying on the floor of that cab like a dog, you go find it. Take your book down there.
How do you know about that? About my butte specifically?
Oh, I know these hills,
He said.
That's about all I know.
He signed off around 9.
43, out. Get some sleep, Ethan Mercer.
And I sat there in the dark with my coffee cup on the map ring and felt better than I'd felt in about 2 years. I didn't think one thing about it. Why would I? There are lookouts all over that country. Some staffed, some not, and half of them are volunteers or old-timers on a stipend. And if you told me that there was a 77-year-old man in a glass box 16 miles away doing exactly what I was doing, I'd have said, yeah, obviously, that tracks. I found the cold spot 2 days later. It was right where he said it would be. He came on most nights around 8:30, once the sun was off the west windows, but never in the daytime. I asked him about that once, and he said daytime was for working. And I said, what work? And he said,
exactly.
And that was the end of it. By the end of the first week, I was setting my whole evening around it. Dinner done, dishes done, log written up by 8, which for a man alone on a mountain is basically formal wear. The first real thing he taught me was how not to look like a fool. Day 9, I saw smoke. Or I thought I did, anyway. Little gray column down in the Bell Creek drainage, maybe 5 miles out, rising real slow. My hands actually shook a little bit, getting the veins lined up. I had an azimuth of 288 and a vertical angle of about -2. And my hand was on the mic when Ian popped up, which was strange because it was 2 in the afternoon and he never did that. He said,
Quartz Butte.
And I said, go ahead. Probably too fast.
That the Bell Creek drainage you're looking at?
Yeah, you see it too?
I see what you see. But before you call it, look at the bottom of it. Not at the top. Everybody looks at the top.
So I looked at the bottom of it. And the bottom of it wasn't attached to anything. It sat about 30 feet off the ground with nothing underneath it. And the longer I watched, the more it moved like water instead of smoke.
That's what you call a water dog,
He said.
Fog patch. You got 2 inches of rain Sunday, and that's the first hot afternoon since. That country's going to steam like a wet dog on a porch all week, and every one of them is going to look like a fire for about 4 minutes. Watch it for a bit. Smoke tends to build. That'll thin out and quit.
And it thinned out and quit in about 10 minutes. Hey, how'd you know that wasn't a fire?
I didn't. I just knew it wasn't yet.
He sounded like he was enjoying himself a bit.
That's the job. You're not paid to be right. You're paid to be early and honest. But if you call a water dog a fire, you'll do it again every week out of embarrassment because you'll have stopped trusting your own eyes.
And if I don't call it and it is one?
Then somebody buys a helicopter ride they didn't need to buy. So call it early. Describe what you actually see. Don't decorate it. Color, volume, which way it's drifting. Let dispatch do the worrying. That's what they're for. It's the only thing they're for.
I laughed a bit and he said,
Yeah, you didn't hear that from me.
He was funny in a specific way I've never been able to reproduce for anybody. He didn't just tell jokes. He'd say the true thing in the driest way possible and then not follow it up. I told him that I had made pancakes for dinner 3 nights running, and he said,
That's not a problem. That's a system.
The divorce came out sideways. I'd said something about not having anybody to mail things to, and he put the rest together without making me explain it.
How long were you married?
About 6 years.
That's long enough to have real furniture, I guess.
Yeah, she kept it.
Well, she had to live in the house.
And that was the entirety of his commentary on the collapse of my marriage, and somehow that was the least insulting thing anybody had said to me that whole year. He talked about weather constantly, but not the way a forecaster does. The way a farmer does, I guess. He'd tell me 2 days out that a dry front was coming through, and he'd be right. And if I asked how, he'd say something like the mare's tails had come in wrong, or,
"You feel that? The air's got a bite in it. Somebody opened a door up north."
he taught me to watch the ravens. When they quit riding the thermals off of the south face in the early afternoon and go sit in the trees, the wind's about to switch. I assumed that was folklore, but it isn't. I've watched it work maybe 40 times since, and it beats the spot forecast. He knew every old road in that country, and he'd walk me down them over the radio like a man giving directions to the house he grew up in. There was a logging railroad right up Bell Creek from an outfit that pulled out before the war, and he could tell me where the trestle bents were still standing in the creek, where the grade washed out, and that at about 40 feet uphill from the grade, there was a spring with a length of galvanized pipe hammered into the bank by somebody a century ago. Ran cold all summer.
"If you ever have to walk out there for whatever reason and you're dry,"
he said,
"that's your water."
and I found the pipe later. I actually found the pipe. His old fire seasons I could have listened to for hours. He never dated them. I only noticed that afterwards, going back over it. And even then it doesn't prove much because old-timers don't tend to date their stories. They say, 1 year or that year or, yeah, there's this season, and you just fill in a decade yourself out of politeness. There was a packer named Alvy who brought supplies to the lookouts on mules, and a mule named Bishop could open a pannier with his lips and once ate most of a summer's sugar, and they made Alvy repack the whole string on the trail in the rain while everybody watched. There was a smoke jumper who came down through the canopy and put both boots through the roof of a district outhouse and had to be cut out of it while a crew stood around, in Ian's words,
"Offering advice."
There was a foreman who took his crew 9 miles into the dark to a lightning fire that a rainstorm had put out about 45 minutes before they got there, and then who told that story the rest of his life like they'd actually fought it.
"You'll meet him,"
Ian said.
"Not him, but you'll meet him."
There was that crew that dug line all night in a heavy smoke and came back at daylight to find they'd put a beautiful hand line around a burning stump. None of it was spooky. There was nothing in those conversations that would have raised the hair on a reasonable man's arms. It was just 2 guys on a party line in the middle of nowhere. One of them had been doing it for a very long time, and the other just needed something to look forward to. The lightning came on day 15. I'd seen storms from below, but I had never seen one from inside. It built through the afternoon over the crest, big anvil tops, and by 4 the base had gone that green-black color that means business. My humidity had been sitting at 14% for 3 full days. Dispatch had a red flag out, and it seemed like everybody on the district got a little tighter in the shoulders. Ian came on early, 6 o'clock, while the sun was still high.
"You've got about 40 minutes. You know what to do?"
Denny showed me the stool.
"Do it now, not when it's on top of you. Shutters down on the west and the north. Unplug the charger. Actually, just unplug anything on a cord. Take the antenna lead off the back of the base and set it on the floor away from you. Not on the metal, but on the floor."
You want me off the radio?
"I want you alive on the radio in an hour."
Then he paused.
"And take a log and a pencil to the stool. You're going to want the strikes marked, because in about 3 days somebody's going to ask you where they were, and by then you'll have forgotten every single one."
So I did it. I did all of it. Then it came over the top of that butte, and it was like standing inside a shop where a man is dropping sheets of steel on a concrete floor. It was the loudest thing I've ever heard in my life. 2 hours and 10 minutes of it. Wooden stool, glass insulators under the legs, hands in my lap like a schoolboy, and a glass room on top of a freaking mountain. Every hair on my arms was standing straight up. Twice the whole cab went white, and the crack came at the same instant as the light. And that means it's yours. The second one hit the ridge maybe 200 yards north, and I felt it come up through the floor and into my boots. Maybe even my bones. 41 strikes counted, 38 of them marked on the map with a dot and a time. When it moved off east and the rain came in behind it, my hands were shaking badly enough that I had trouble getting the antenna lead screwed back on. He came up the second I keyed in.
Still there?
Yeah, still here.
How many?
41 that I saw, 2 right on top of me.
You'll sleep tonight.
He said.
Nothing on God's earth sleeps like a man who was scared for 2 straight hours and then suddenly wasn't.
And then...
Now listen, half of those are nothing. Some of them are laying in a snag right now, and they'll smolder in a week. 9 days sometimes. Sleepers, we call them. You've got rain on it tonight, so nothing shows tomorrow, and you'll think you got away with it. And then the first hot, dry afternoon you'll get one, and it'll come up in a spot you've already looked at 40 times. So, mind your dots. Look at your dots. Every single day, all season.
So I looked at my dots every single day for the rest of that summer. 11 days after the storm, I got a smoke at 106 degrees, 200 yards from a dot I'd marked at 7:48 in the evening. First fire I ever called in as a lookout. Helitac was on it in 40 minutes and caught it at 1/10 of an acre. And when I got off that radio, I was so pleased with myself. I had to go out and walk a lap around the catwalk. Before I wrote it in the log, before anything else, I had to tell Ian.
There you go,
he said, and then a little quieter in a voice he didn't usually use.
That right there is the best day of this job, so enjoy the hell out of it.
There's one other thing about that fire, and it only means anything when you look backwards at it. When you call a smoke, what you want is a cross shot. Another tower, some miles off, puts their hair on the same column, and where the 2 lines intersect is where the fire actually is. That's a location instead of a guess. Ian gave me a bearing. He said,
I'm holding 221 on that.
And I laid it out on my own map ring with a pencil and a straight edge. And it dropped the fire into the bottom of the Little Bell drainage, and I passed that along to dispatch as my own estimate. Dispatch never said a word to him. Not thank you, not copy, nothing. I noticed it for about 1 second, and then I filed it where everybody who has ever worked for an agency files everything, which is that dispatch is busy, dispatch is shorthanded, and dispatch does not have time for your feelings. In 3 weeks, I never once heard anybody on that radio answer him, except me. When this whole thing fell apart, everybody called me gullible a lot. There's an implication inside that word that I've never much cared for. 43 wasn't on my firefinder ring, but the ring only covers my district out to about 30 miles. And Ian had told me he was northwest over the divide, which puts him on the west side forest. A completely different unit. Towers on somebody else's forest aren't your map. That isn't a mystery, it's cartography. He wasn't on the laminated frequency card on the shelf either. That card had 4 names on it, 2 of them crossed out in Sharpie by a previous occupant, and 1 of them misspelt. I asked him for a landmark once, something I could actually look at.
You've got a ridge running northwest past the divide,
he said.
Notch in the middle, bald spot on the south end. Just about the last thing out there before the country falls away.
I found the ridge. I looked at that bald spot with my binoculars a dozen times over the following week, and never saw a tower on it. And I told him so. And then he said,
Well, there's a lot of ridges out there, and they all look like the same thing. Don't strain your eyes on my account.
So I let it go. He was 16 miles away, or maybe 30, or whatever he was. Heat shimmer off that country in July will hide a barn. And he was the best part of my summer, to be honest. So I wasn't really hunting for a reason to put a hole in it. The last ordinary conversation we had, he asked whether I planned on coming back next season. I said I'll give it some thought, that I might.
Good. It's a hell of a way to make a living, but it's an honest one.
And then...
It gets in you, you know? Fair warning. There's fellas who couldn't quit this job if you paid them to.
Day 22, the district flew me a supply run. Normally, you pack in your own groceries on your days off, but the road below the cattle guard had slumped into a culvert washout, and nobody was getting a truck up there for a while. So they hung a sling load off a contract ship that was already working on a project 2 drainages over. 2 propane bottles, 4 cubbies of water, a box of food, a new Pulaski that I didn't even ask for, and my mail. The pilot's name was Dell. Older guy, mustache, sunglasses he never took off. The kind of guy who has flown so many hours that a hover 40 feet off mountaintop is a slightly dull part of his afternoon. He set the load down, then landed on the little pad they blasted out of the ridge in the 60s. Then he got out and stretched and drank one of my Cokes and talked to me for about 10 minutes, because for whatever reason, pilots like talking to the lookouts. We're the only people on the forest who aren't in a big hurry. We talked about the washout and the fire I'd caught and whether the district was going to get a Type 2 team if things kept up. And then, just filling up the air, I said something like, "I've been getting my weather 2 days early off the guy in 43, so tell your dispatch to save their money on the spot forecast." He looked at me. Then he laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh. It was more like the laugh of a man who has been on the receiving end of about 900 jokes from ground personnel and just expects them. He said, "That's good." I said, "What's good?" He said, 43. And when I didn't laugh with him, he said it differently. Again, there's no 43. I explained, old guy, 16 miles northwest, over the divide, west side forest, talks every night. Dell listened to me, and he stopped smiling somewhere in the middle of it, and when I finished, he just said, "Ethan, I've been flying this country since 1994. I know every lookout on both forests because I've hauled water to all of them. There's 4 staffed on this side and 2 on that side. And they're Quartz, Bald Mountain, Pyramid, Sunrise, and over there it's Copper and Ridley. But that's it. That's all of them. And there's no 43. Then who the heck am I talking to?" He shrugged and put his sunglasses back on. "Probably a ham operator. Some old boy with a scanner and a base station. Happens more than you think. Guys get bored." So that's what I went with. All that afternoon and all the next day, that's what I went with. I was, I guess, comfortable with it, even though I wasn't. Because let's be honest, a ham operator with a scanner isn't likely to know exactly where the cold spot is on my mountain. Dell said something to somebody, though. Pilots always do. 2 evenings later, Denny Halverson came up on the radio and asked me to switch to the admin channel. And then he asked me, in that flat voice of his, to tell him exactly what I'd been hearing and when. I told him, and he didn't interrupt. When I was done, he was quiet for a long enough time that I said his name to check the radio was even working. He said,
"Are you sleeping all right up there?"
I said I was sleeping fine. He said,
"Well, you've got Thursday off. I'll have somebody meet you at the cattle guard on a quad. Come down to the station for a bit."
So it was back to Twisp on Thursday. And there were 2 things that happened that day, even though the second one is probably what everybody wants to hear. The first one is when I sat in an office with Denny and the district manager, a tough woman named Sandoval, who I'd met twice in 4 years, and she asked me carefully worded questions in a tone I recognized immediately, because I had 4 months of it in the winter after the poison grade. That tone is, nobody in this room thinks you're lying. Everybody in this room thinks you're unwell. She asked whether I'd been having trouble since the burn over, whether I'd been drinking up there, whether I'd been taking anything, whether I'd talked to anybody about Reyes or Bird. I answered all of it, and at some point in the middle, I heard how it sounded coming out of my own mouth. The man saying he'd made a friend nobody else could hear. And I got a little quiet, and Denny saw it too, and God bless him. He said, "Bev, show him the box." Because here's what nobody had told me yet. Denny had already gone looking. He'd gone looking the same night Dell called him, because Denny Halverson had heard the number 43 before. The second thing was the box. It was a records carton from the archive room in the basement. And the archive room in a ranger station is a beautiful thing that no one under 50 has ever entered. Green metal shelves, rolled maps and tubes, photostats, original lookout logs going back further than they should, because somebody in 1974 decided not to throw them away and nobody since has had the authority to overrule a dead man. They spread it out on a conference table and it took the better part of 3 hours. There's a district map from 1961 with a detection network on it, every lookout marked with a little triangle and a number in a circle. Quartz Butte was there, number 12. And northwest, over the divide, on a ridge with a notch in the middle of it and a bald knob on the south end, there was a triangle with a 43 in the circle, and next to it in tiny letters, Bell CR, Butte Lookout. Elevation, 5,880 feet, 16 and a half miles from where I'd been standing that morning. There was even a photograph, even though it was black and white, 5x7, curling up at one corner, a stamp on the back from the regional office. It showed an L4 cab on a short timber tower, maybe 15 feet of legs, guy wires, a stovepipe with a screen on it. Same pattern as mine. A man standing on the catwalk at the corner nearest the camera. He's got a hand up. Whether he's waving at the photographer or shading his eyes, you can't really tell from the picture. He's wearing a white undershirt and suspenders, and a hat with a brim that's gone a little soft. He's too far away and the film's too grainy to give me a face. Just a shape of a man with his hand up. There was a fire report. Region 6. Individual fire report. Form filled out on a typewriter with a bad E, apparently. There was a lightning storm on the night of July 22nd, 1967. The lookout at 43 called in 9 strikes over an hour. Then he called in 1 on his own ridge. And then, 3 minutes later, he reported the tower was burning. The fire that came off Bell Creek Butte ran 840 acres for the following 2 days. They got a crew in there on the 24th, but the tower was gone. 4 burned off timber stubs, the cast iron of the stove, the base of the firefinder pedestal, and some melted glass. But they found no remains. They searched the ridge and both drainages for 6 days, and they never found him. And the report says what any of those reports say when nobody wants to write down what they actually think, which is that the subject was presumed to have perished in the fire and that his recovery was prevented by burn severity and terrain. And you guessed it, his name, no shocker here, was Ian Ostrin, 68 years old, hired that spring at a GS2, previous occupation listed as timber faller. His address of record was a hotel in Wenatchee. There was no next of kin listed. There's a line on the form for that, and somebody had typed simply, "None known," in all caps. After 1967, they decided not to rebuild Bell Creek Butte. They were shutting lookouts down all through those years anyway, because aerial detection was coming in hot. The number 43 was never reassigned. It came off the maps in 1970, and then it just stayed off. And then Denny put the last thing on the table, and that's the one that really got to me. It about took my legs out from under me. It was Ian Ostrin's logbook. Not from 67, that one burned. This one was from 1962, when he worked a different tower down on the Chelan side, and somebody had filed it. And then it sat in a green metal shelf for 60 years waiting for me. It was written in pencil, small tight handwriting that slanted backwards a bit. Weather, listed 3 times a day. Visitors, smokes, little notes in the margins, the way every lookout writes little notes in the margins. August 9th, ravens off the thermals by 2 o'clock p.m. Wind switched to 240. Told Ferris that he owes me a Coke. August 14th, steam off the Cub Creek, clear cut all afternoon. 4 false smokes, but no fires. Water dogs. August 21st, Alvy Inn at noon with the string. Bishop got into the sugar again. Alvy repacked it in the rain, and I've never in my life been so entertained. I sat in that basement with my hands flat on the table on either side of that book, and I didn't say a word for a little while. Finally, Bev Sandoval put a hand on my shoulder and just left it there, which, for me, personally, it was probably the kindest thing anybody did for me that whole year. And then she said, in a very gentle tone, which is not like her at all, "Ethan, do you understand how this looks?" And I said, yeah, I do. Because let's just lay it out cold. There's a mentally struggling man alone on a mountain who survived a fire that killed 2 of his close friends. That man had access to a station archive on his first day when the fire tech walked him through the place, and there are old logs and old photos in it. So he builds a friend out of it, 68 years old, dry sense of humor, knows all the old roads. Then he starts hearing the friend on the radio. Trust me, I've gone at this from this angle for a long time, probably for years. I've even paid professionals, people that know a lot more than I do, to help me go at it from that angle and different angles. And it comes apart in one place and only one place. And that place it comes apart is that I never went into that basement. Not once. Not that day with Denny, not today, not yesterday, not any day. But I couldn't really prove that, could I? You can't prove where you haven't been. They put me back on that mountain, though. And that's the part that a lot of people find strange. They'd have been within their rights to pull me that day. Bev asked if I wanted to be pulled, and I said no. And I think Denny went to bat for me. And I think honestly that on a district that short-staffed in the middle of July, a warm body on Quartz Butte was worth a certain amount of ambiguity. The quad dropped me off at the cattle guard at 4 in the afternoon, and I hiked up in the heat, and I did my 1 o'clock late. And then I just sat there and watched the sun go off the west glass. At 8:30, the radio came on.
Quartz Butte, lookout 43.
And I let it sit for a minute. I sat on the edge of that bed with the mic in my hand, and I let it sit for probably 40 seconds before I responded. Then I finally keyed up and said, I went down to the station today.
I know you did.
How could you possibly know that?
Because you weren't there last night and you didn't do your 1 o'clock. There's only 2 reasons a man misses his 1 o'clock.
He sounded exactly the same. He sounded exactly, precisely the same.
So, what did they show you?
The photograph.
Which one? Is it the one where I'm standing out on the catwalk like a damn fool?
And I said, yeah.
They took 4 that day, and that's the only one anybody ever kept. I wasn't waving. The sun was in my eyes.
I don't know what I had expected. Denial, maybe. Or the whole thing going to static and never coming back, which would have probably been easier, and I've thought since that I might have preferred it. But what I got instead was a 70-year-old man being mildly irritated about a photograph. I said, coldly, Ian.
Go ahead.
They said the tower burned in 1967. They said you were in it.
They looked hard,
he said.
I'll give them that. 6 days. Frank Dorsey ran that search, and he was a thorough man.
That's not an answer.
No,
he said.
It isn't.
And then, after a bit,
I've wondered how long it would take you. I'll tell you the truth. I thought you'd have it in the first week. You had that ridge in your binoculars for 4 days straight. I figured you were just being polite.
I asked him, just coldly, if he was dead. I said it in those words, too, out loud, into a Forest Service radio. He was quiet for a moment.
I don't know how to answer that in a way that would satisfy you,
he said.
I never left. They came up that ridge faster than anybody would believe, and it took the stairs first, and I got out onto the catwalk. And after that, I've got a stretch where I don't remember anything. And then I was still there, and it was morning, and the tower was fine.
He paused for a minute.
The tower's been fine ever since.
That's not possible.
No.
Then how are you even talking to me?
The way I talked to the fella in '89 and the girl who sat quartz in, I think, 2004. Radio's a radio.
He let out a breath or something like one.
You're not the first one to work it out, you know. You took longer than most, and you were kinder about it than most. And I'd like you to know that I noticed it.
I didn't say anything. I just took it all in.
Don't get worked up,
he said.
Nothing's changed since yesterday except what you know. I'm the same as I was, and I've never once asked you for a thing, have I?
All of this was true. He had never asked me for anything.
What's your RH doing?
Then I told him. I'm not even going to try to defend it to you or to anybody. He asked me for my humidity, and I looked at the slip on the table, and I told him 19%. And he said that was going to be trouble by the weekend. And, big surprise, he was right about that, too. Before he signed off, he said,
You ought to come see me sometime. It's a long walk, but it's a pretty one.
I gave a nervous laugh. It came out all wrong, high and quick. The way you laugh when somebody says something at a funeral. He said,
It's still there, Ethan. The tower's still there, if you know where to look.
And then
43, out.
I saw it 4 nights later. It was about 20 minutes after sunset. That's when the good light comes on in that country, when the ridges go flat and blue and stack up behind each other like paper cutouts, and you can count 7 of them. I was on the catwalk with a cup of coffee, doing nothing in particular, and on the notched ridge northwest, on the bald south end, there is a shape breaking the skyline that hadn't been there in the afternoon. 16.5 miles. At that distance, a lookout tower is smaller than a pencil mark. But it was a hard edge in a place with no hard edges. A little vertical tick with a wider bit at the top of it. And once I'd seen it, I couldn't unsee it. It was like one of those optical illusion paintings that I used to see at the mall as a kid. You would stare at it for probably 20 minutes until the image finally came to be. But then once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. This was kind of the same thing. I got the binoculars and looked. It stayed a shape, but it never resolved. And then it was gone in the morning. Not gone like it fell down, but gone like the ridge was just a ridge. But the next night, there was a light in it. One small warm light, low, the color of a kerosene lantern and not the color of anything electric. It burned steady for maybe 2 hours and then went out. 2 nights after that, I saw somebody on the catwalk. I don't know, maybe I just saw a break in the shape where the light was. But on that break, something moved along the length of it and stopped at the corner, which is what a man walking out to lean on the railing would look like at 16 miles. That's when I got my phone out and took pictures, which is a thing I feel kind of stupid about now. I zoomed in as far as it would go. What I have is 9 photographs of a dark blue rectangle with a single orange pixel in the upper left. It could be a lantern in a tower window. It could be a campfire 9 miles closer. It could be a lens flare off Venus. I showed it to 2 people over the years and both of them said kindly, "Huh." I'll share them here and you can be the judge. The last time, the figure lifted a hand. I'm not going to tell you that I'm completely certain about this. I mean, I was looking through an 8-power glass at last light across 16 miles of heat-shed air, and I know exactly what that does. I know how many people have sworn to a shape on a ridge. All I can tell you is that I'd been watching that corner of the catwalk for about 10 minutes, and the shape at the corner raised something that was about the right size and the right shape of a hand, and it held it up longer than a man scratching his head would, and then it lowered it. So I raised mine back. That's the worst thing I did that summer, and I've never told anybody that. Not even the doctors, not even all the therapists. I stood on my catwalk, and I waved back at him. I tried one more time to make the world tell me I was wrong. I called Denny on the admin channel and asked him, without explaining much, whether Dell could put a ship over Bell Creek Butte next time he was working that side and just look. Denny didn't ask why. Denny is a man who understands that some questions don't need to be asked twice. Dell flew it that Friday. He came up on the radio afterwards himself, which he didn't have to do. He said,
Went right over the top of it, 2 passes, 800 feet. There's 4 burned stubs in the ground, about yay big, and a pile of rocks somebody stacked up sometime, and a lot of little fur coming in on the north side. Nothing else. No structure, no metal. Nothing's been up there in 50 years except goats.
I said, thanks. And then he said,
You all right?
I lied and said yes. That night, the light was in the window again. I had 2 days off coming at the end of the month, and I went, and I took it. I guess there's no version of this where I come out looking sensible, so I'll just lay it out how I planned it. I didn't wander up there in the fugue. I studied the map for 3 nights. There's no trail to Bell Creek Butte and hasn't been since the 60s, but the old railroad grade runs 7 miles up the drainage from a gravel pit off the county road. And from the head of the grade, it's about 2.5 miles of side hilling, and then 1,200 feet of climb up in the south shoulder. I left a note in my cab that said where I was going, and when I'd be back. which is what you do. But I also told nobody, which is definitely something you don't do. I drove around the long way and parked at the pit at about 5 in the morning. The grade was easy walking for the first 4 miles. Something in me just would not let it rest. I had to go out there on my own feet. I had to look with my own eyes, hear with my own ears. I just had to know I wasn't that crazy, that I hadn't absolutely lost it. It was hard not to start believing what everybody else was already believing. The grade was easy walking for the first 4 miles. You can still see where the ties were. There's a place where a trestle went across, and the bents are standing in the creek exactly the way he described them, gray and hard as bone, with the creek working around them. 4.5 miles up, I found the spring. There was a length of galvanized pipe hammered into the cut bank 40 feet above the grade, 1.25 inches, rusted at the threads, and cold water coming out of it into a basin of gravel that 100 years of that water had dug for itself. I filled both my bottles. I sat down next to it and drank until my teeth hurt, and I remember laughing out loud, one of those laughs that really isn't about anything funny. Maybe I was losing it. Because at that point, I'd stopped being able to hold 2 ideas at once, and the idea I was currently holding was, he told me true things. The side hill was miserable. Old burn, which means blowdown, which means you spend 4 hours going 1.5 miles and you're never once standing on level ground. The climb up the shoulder was definitely better. The last 200 feet, the young fir got thick, and I came through it into the open on the bald. And the tower was there. I stood in that fir at the edge of the clearing for a while, long enough that my legs got cold. It was an L4, like mine. Short timber legs, maybe 16 feet, 4 of them on concrete pads, cross-braced, with a wooden stair going up the north side and guy wires running down to anchors in the rock. The cab was painted the old color, that pale gray-green they used, and it wasn't peeling. The shutter props were down. There was a stovepipe with a screen cap. There was a broom leaning by the door at the top of the stairs, bristles worn off at an angle. Despite all those details that I just gave you, the one that really stuck with me was this one. The stair treads were worn. Every one of them had a shallow dish worn in the middle where boots go. 59 years of a man walking up and down. Nothing about it felt haunted. It felt used. It smelled like hot creosote and dust and pine, the exact smell of my own tower at 3 in the afternoon. Grasshoppers were going in the dry grass, a raven somewhere below the west side. He came out onto the catwalk while I was standing down there, and he leaned on the railing and looked down at me and said, "Hey, well, you took the grade, didn't you? Everybody takes the grade, but it's twice as long." He was a big old man gone narrow with age, white stubble, 3 or 4 days of it, suspenders over a white undershirt, wire glasses pushed up on his forehead, forearms on him like a man who felled timber with a saw that weighed as much as a child. And when I got to the top of those stairs, he put out his hand, and I shook it, and it was warm, and it was dry, and there were calluses on it in the places where a man carries a Pulaski. I've shaken a lot of hands. That one was a hand. "Coffee's on," he said. "It's terrible as always. Why don't you come in out of the sun?" The inside of that cab was the inside of my cab. Firefinder in the middle on its pedestal, brass gone dull, the map ring inside it hand-lettered, iron bed on the north wall with an army blanket squared away on it, 2 burner on the counter, cast iron hanging, a shelf with a wind-up clock, a Bible, a deck of cards, and a Zane gray paperback held together with electric tape. No electric anything, no radio charger. There was a radio on the shelf, and I looked at it for a bit, and I couldn't even tell you what it was. Its handset was on a curly cord, and a face with a needle on it. It looked like something out of a picture of a train station. And on the wall above the counter, floor to ceiling, 5 shelves of logbooks. They were the standard kind. Green board covers, the district stamp on the front, a season written in pencil on the spine. And they were in order, and there were no gaps. I ran my finger along the spines while he was pouring coffee, and I said the numbers out loud without meaning to. 68, 69, 70, 71. 59 of them, he said. There'd be 60, but I lost one in the fire. He talked while I stood there. Just talked, easy as anything. The way he did on the radio. And that's the part that's kind of hard to explain, to be honest. Because if he had loomed at me or said something in a strange voice, I'd have been out that door in half a second. But he didn't do that. There's nothing haunted or creepy about it. Instead, he just complained about the district, like everybody does. He said they hadn't sent him a new psychrometer since the sling broke and he had to whip it up with wire, and that the water in the cistern had gone bad twice and nobody bothered to come, and that the packer hadn't been up in a long time. And for whatever reason, when he said that last part, it kind of made my chest hurt. Alvy's late, is how he said it. He's usually not. He said dispatch had quit answering him years ago. He said that he still called his weather in every day at 1 o'clock anyway because it's the job, and because you never know who's listening. And I said, I'm listening. And he said, I know it. That's been the nicest thing in a while. I asked him if I could look at one of the books. Help yourself. I took the current one down off the end of the shelf. His handwriting, that small, tight pencil slanting the wrong way, the same as the 1962 log in the basement in Twisp. Weather 3 times a day, columns ruled by hand. And on the page for that day, that actual day, and that actual week, it said the wind was light out of the southwest, and the fuels were critical. And then underneath, in the margin, it said, Quartz Butte caught one at 106 on the 19th. Held at a 10th acre. He's a good man. I closed the book. I put it back on the shelf, and I got it in straight, and I remember being very careful about getting it in straight. I don't even know how long I was in there. It's not a figure of speech, and it's not me being coy about it. I got to the top of those stairs at about 4 in the afternoon. I know that because I looked at my watch on the last switchback. And we talked. We talked about the burn in 01 below my butte, and about a fire in Iniat in some year he didn't name, and whether a person ought to keep a dog out on a lookout. And he thought not, on account of the porcupines. At some point, I looked out the west window, and the light was exactly the same as when I'd come in. I looked at my watch, and my watch said 4:15. I picked up my pack off the floor, and my water bottles were empty, both of them. I filled them at the spring, and I drank maybe half of one on the climb, and they were empty and dry inside. And there was a sandwich wrapper on the counter that was mine, flattened out and folded into a little square, the way I fold them, and I don't even remember eating it. There was a second bunk. It was against the east wall under the window, and I'd been looking right at it for however long I'd been in that room, and I hadn't even seen it. A canvas cot with a folded wool blanket at the foot of it, and on the nail above it, a canvas coat. I said, Ian, how long have I been up here? And he said, without any change in his voice at all, you got in yesterday. Yeah, the initial feelings I felt, they weren't even fear exactly. Fear came about 4 seconds later. The first thing that I remember happening was that I had to mentally work and remember what I was going back to. I had to actually go looking for it. My tower, my truck, my rented room in Twisp with the duffel bag, the fact that it was a Tuesday, that there was a season on and a fire year building and men working. All of it had gone thin and faint and reasonable to set down. And what was in front of me was a warm room and a pot on the stove, and a man I liked better than anybody else alive. He was looking at me, not in a hungrily way or slyly or creepy way. He was just looking at me. Similar to the way you look at somebody when you already know what they're going to say and you're just bracing up to be gracious about it, I guess. He just said, It's a good spot, this. You could sit the season out up here and nobody'd bother you. And then kindly, I mean genuinely kindly, nobody comes looking for a man twice, Ethan. You know that better than most. And I said, I gotta do my 1 o'clock. And he said, I know. I went out that door and down those stairs, and I was running before I hit the grass. He didn't come after me. He didn't shout. There was no sound out of that tower at all, and about halfway across the bald, at the top of the shale, I heard him call out behind me. Not loud, just pitched enough to carry. Watch your footing on that rock. I don't have the walkout. I have the top of the shale, and I have coming to at the spring, on my knees in the gravel with my face in that pipe, drinking water. Between those two things, there's about 4.5 miles of country, and I don't have any of it. My shins were cut up under my pants and my palms were skinned, and there was a long tear in one sleeve, so whatever happened in there, it happened at full speed. It was full dark by the time I got to the truck. I drove out to the county road doing about 50 on gravel, which is kind of dumb, and then around and up 4720 to the washout. And I left the truck at the cattle guard, and I went up the hill with my headlamp on. 42 steel steps. I came up through the trapdoor in the catwalk floor and dropped it shut behind me, and turned the hasp and put the padlock through it, and that padlock had been sitting in a coffee can for 20 years, and I had never once used it. Then I sat down on the floor with my back against the map pedestal, and I laughed, and my hands were shaking, and I thought I had gotten out. That's where the story started. That's the part that I told you first, if you remember. The first flight went off beneath me at about 11:15. I went out on the catwalk and I leaned over the rail, and I said my name into the dark, and he came up past the second landing without breaking stride, and he did not answer me. He never said one word. 3 weeks, every evening, that man talked to me. He told me about mules and ravens and dry fronts, and going up those stairs, he didn't say anything at all. And it was the silence that took the bottom out of me. If he had just said, "Ethan," in that voice, I think I would have opened the trap door. I honestly do. I think I would have just opened it and made him coffee. Third flight, same pace. Not fast, not slow. The pace of a man who has all the time in the world. I went inside and I got the emergency pack out from under the bed. There's 100 feet of half-inch rope in a lookout's gear, and webbing and 2 carabiners, and a fire shelter, a first aid kit, and that rope was in there for lowering somebody with a broken leg down the front of a rock face. And nobody had ever used it for anything. I don't really know what to tell you at this point. I don't know if it was just compulsion or anything else for that matter. Something inside of me just clicked and I knew I had to get out. I tied it around the base of the firefinder pedestal, which is bolted through the floor into the frame of the building, and I threw the coil out of the south window, the one on the far side from the stairs. He hit the top landing while I was getting my leg over the sill. I sat on that windowsill with the rope in both hands, 60 feet of air under my boots, and I heard the trapdoor take its first push, and the hasp held, and I understood something in that clear moment that I don't have any word for. I understood what I had to do. Because he wasn't going to stop. He'd been on that ridge for 59 years, and if the door held for some reason, he would come up tomorrow, and the night after. He'd wait me out until the season ended. And then there'd be a road walk and a bus station and a rented room, and eventually during some night in some town that I'd never been in, I'd hear his boots on the stair. I imagine him just pursuing me all of my life, like that sinister fella in No Country for Old Men, maybe with a slightly better haircut. Ian had all the time that there is. That's what he had, and that's what I didn't have. So yeah, what I did next wasn't brave. Wasn't organized, it wasn't a plan. I don't even think it was something I chose to do. It was as if it was pre-planned, predestined to happen. There's a gallon can of white gas on the shelf by the door for the Coleman stove. I reached back in through that window and I got it, and I unscrewed the cap, and I just began pouring it across the floor and across the mattress and over the cupboard doors, and I threw the can into the corner. The trap door was moving against the hasp, steady, without any anger in it. I got a road flare out of the emergency pack because my hands were shaking too hard for matches. I struck it on the sill and I dropped it inside, and then I went out that window. The rope took the skin off both my palms. I don't even remember most of the way down. The cab went up faster than I would have believed, and I've been on fires my whole adult life. Old dry fur, 60 years of varnish and creosote and dust, on top of a mountain, with the wind coming up the south face at 9 miles an hour. It was through the roof in under 2 minutes. I ran for the tree line and I got to the edge of the fir, and then I turned around. The whole cab was going, and the light off it was up in the trees all around me, and the shutters had caught, and I remember the glass was cracking with a sound like somebody dropping plates in a far-off room. There was a man on the catwalk. He was leaning on the railing on the north corner with his forearms crossed over it, easily, the way a man leans on a fence to look out on a field. He wasn't moving. He wasn't even burning as far as I could see, though everything behind him definitely was. He straightened up and then lifted one hand. That's all. No shout, no gesture at me, nothing you'd call a signal. He held it up for about as long as any man holds it up when he's seeing somebody off at the end of a driveway, and then he lowered it, and then the smoke came around the north side of the tower, and there wasn't anything else to see. I sat down in the duff and I watched my own lookout burn to the ground, and at some point, I keyed the handheld in my chest pocket and said the words that ended my life, which were, "Okanagan, Quartz Butte. My tower's on fire." The fire got out. Of course it did. It ran 110 acres over the north side of that butte, into the old timber, and they put 80 people on it, and it cost the government somewhere around $400,000. And nobody died. And trust me, I've been grateful for that one fact every day since. The investigation took 11 weeks. They had a fuel can with my prints on it, and a used road flare and a rope tied to the firefinder pedestal, which is about as clean of a story as an investigator ever gets handed. I told them the truth, all of it, twice on tape. You have to understand that there's no version of that where anybody believed me, and I don't hold it against a single one of them. If a man told me what I had told them, I'd have already thought the same thing they thought. They already had a file on me with a burnover in it, and 2 dead friends and a divorce, and now they had a lookout who'd made up a companion out of an archive he'd never entered, and then set fire to a federal property at midnight. I pled to a misdemeanor in the end, because the U.S. attorney had bigger things going, and because my lawyer was better than I could afford. Restitution I'll be paying for the rest of my life. Terminated, obviously. And then the other thing, the thing that isn't written down anywhere and doesn't need to be. I put in 11 applications over the next 3 years, state, federal, contract, and I never got a call back on any of them. There's about 400 people in the fire community in that part of the state, and all of them heard the story I just told you by October. Bev Sandoval sent me a letter about a year after. She didn't really say she believed me. She said she'd read the 67 report again, and that she was sorry about the whole thing had gone. I still have that letter. Denny never really said anything. But when I was living out of my car for that first winter, he found me at a gas station in Okanagan. He didn't ask a single question. He just gave me $200 and told me to get the wheel bearing on my car looked at. I sell hardware now. I have for 6 years. It's a good store, family owned, and the owner knows the whole story, and he hired me anyway. I'm not going to name the town. People recognize me sometimes, not often. Once or twice a summer, somebody looks at my name tag a beat too long, and I can see them putting it together. And then I get the face. To most of them, I'm just the guy who burned down a fire lookout. That's it. That's the whole story. And it's not really an unfair summary, I guess. And I quit arguing with anybody about it for a long time anyway. I still do the weather. Nobody asks me to. I've got a sling psychrometer on the back porch and a notebook, and at 1 p.m. on my days off, I whip it around my head like a fool and write the numbers down. There are maybe 19 notebooks now. My girlfriend thinks it's a charming little habit, and I just let her think that. Last month, in the evening, near closing time, a kid came into the hardware store. 19, 20 maybe. Basketball shorts, boots that hadn't been broken in, buying work gloves and a headlamp and 2 of those little Nalgene bottles and a folding shovel that he probably didn't need. And a stack of maps. He was lit up like Christmas. He told me before I asked. First season with the Forest Service, and he'd wanted a hotshot crew, but he got detection instead. And he was disappointed about it at first, but then he wasn't, because he'd looked up photographs of the tower and it was on top of a mountain, and he could not believe they were going to pay him to just live there. He asked me if I'd ever done anything like that, and I stood there, with my hand on his maps. I thought about telling him, I did. I thought about it hard, standing at that register, and I ran it forward in my mind the way you run things at that age in your life. And I saw exactly how it goes. An old man behind a counter tells a kid a ghost story about a radio, and then the kid tells it that night at the bar in a funny voice, and it gets a laugh, and it makes no difference to anything. So I just said that I worked a few seasons a long time ago. I told him to take a broom for the flying ants, and to sweep every day whether it needed it or not. And he just said, "Cool." I rang him up, $61 and change, and while I was folding the maps to fit them in the bag, I saw the top one wasn't a district map like the others. It was one of those thick recreation maps they print on the plastic paper, the northern part of the range, and it was folded open to the corner past the divide. There's a ridge up there with a notch in the middle of it, and a bald knob on the south end. Printed right on it, and that little serif type they use for structures, next to a small black triangle. Lookout 43. I put it in the bag with the rest, and I gave him his receipt, and I told him good luck.
Hello? Is anyone down here? What is this? My name, Jonah, Elias, Crow. Hey. Oh my lord. I know you.
The red light's on. The trees are moving. Whatever you do, don't let the room go quiet. At 12:01, the branches shook. At 12:02, they crossed the brook. At 12:03, they reached the wire. And every black eye watched the tower. I cleared my throat and told a tale. The footsteps stopped beside the trail. I let 1 second pass me by, and something scratched the door outside. Keep talking, Jonah, don't you stop. Keep that needle turning. Keep talking, Jonah, feel the dark. The woods are always listening. Speak till your mouth is dry as bone. Speak till the morning comes. Keep talking, Jonah, keep talking, or they're gonna come. I read the news from 7 to 6. A missing dog, a broken bridge. I sang a hymn, I told a joke, and watched their shapes move through the smoke. The microphone grew hot beneath the weight of every word I breathed. I lost my place, the signal dipped. A hand came through the window slit. Keep talking, Jonah, don't you stop. Keep that needle turning. Keep talking, Jonah, feel the dark. The woods are always listening. Speak till your mouth is dry as bone. Speak till the morning comes. Keep talking, Jonah, keep the stories end? What happens when I lose my breath? What happens when the power fails and every light goes black but red? I've counted every tale I know. I've told the ones from long ago. There's only one I haven't told. The reason I can't go home. At 401 the roof gave way. At 402 they spoke her name. At 403 the hallway groaned and something answered from below. The basement lock began to turn. The on-air light began to burn. I leaned in close and said, my friends, I guess we'll start this show again. Keep talking, Jonah, don't you stop.